All right, welcome back. This is the Force with Friends, episode 10, and today we are talking Ahsoka and Sabine in Exile on Peridia. Welcome back. This is Will with the Padawan Pops YouTube channel and my co-host Kevin. And as I said, we are going to be breaking down what we think is going to happen with Ahsoka and Sabine while they are on Exile in Prydia. We get a little bit of a glimpse of the two of them at the end of Ahsoka episode 8. So today we're going to talk about what we would like to see going forward. So really quick before we get started, just a few bits and pieces of Star Wars news. Like we said before, I think we touched on this last week, but Skeleton Crew looks like it's probably coming out the first of next year, so that will be something to look forward to. And then there were actually some Funko Pop releases that went on this week on Instagram on Diz Trackers, and that is the next Ahsoka line. So we got to see a Balin skull Funko Pop, which is super cool. There was Thrawn, Shin, I think Morgan Elsbeth, and a couple stormtroopers. So they look pretty cool. And then another Mandalorian line from Mando Season 3, which is like super late. There is an armorer pop there though, so that's the big one that I was looking at. Yeah, that one was super cool. So outside of that, I don't know, I'm kind of past Mando Season 3, but that's the Star Wars news for right now. Not really anything else to break down as far as Star Wars goes. So let's hop into our topic. I'll go ahead and give my opinion first on what I think may happen on Prydia with Ahsoka and Sabine. So just quick rundown. If you did not watch Ahsoka, but for some reason you're watching this, hey, cool, we're glad you're here. Like and subscribe while you're here. But the end of Ahsoka is trapped on Prydia with Sabine. Thrawn leaves. There's no ship for them to get back on, or there is, but they don't have the coordinates. So they're stuck. Anakin shows up as a Force ghost, and that's where they are. We have Shin. She is also on the planet with those raiders. Balin is out chasing Mortis. So they're all there. So I think this could go really one of two ways with them. The first, I'll start with the not as cool one because I'm hoping that's not what happens. Yeah. But the first option would be we really don't see anything of what they do on Peridia. Like on Skeleton Crew, that's supposed to be in this galaxy. Right. And I'm assuming on this planet, I don't think they would expand this galaxy. Maybe they just happen to find Ahsoka and Sabine and they explain what they've been doing and they rescue them and take them back to the galaxy. That would be like the one episode of Skeleton Crew explanation. I hope that's not it, but I suppose it could be, like, do you think they would do that to us?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I've been thinking about that because, I mean, we can talk about, I think it'll be interesting to talk about Skeleton Crew as it gets closer.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of, especially now with the probability that it's going to be on this planet, this new galaxy, which makes sense, right? If that description thing that you sent me, it sounds like they may somehow get there in the world between worlds or something, which makes sense, right? Like if it's connected with Mortis and we found that was a big connection to the planet. So we don't know, right? We're all speculating. Right. But
yeah,
you would think, though, just to briefly touch on that show, that there's going to be a lot of exploration of the world, right? Like, I feel like that's where we're going to maybe get into some of the history of this place, which I really want to know, right? That's something that I'm really kind of dying to know is how this place ended up the way it ended up.
Yeah.
Why are there just these roaming bands of raiders and nomads and
yeah, they're just kind of there.
Yeah, it's I'm really interested in what's gone down on Peridia. So I think we'll get some of that in Skeleton Crew. So where that leaves us with Ahsoka and Sabine, I think there's room for some interesting things, but I don't know that it's a full season's worth for them. And that's where I'm not sure about what we're going to see. So
yeah,
I don't know. So I get your point. I hope that's not, I hope it's not the case that we just don't see them until a random episode of, and that's it, right? Like I do hope we get more fleshed out, but I don't know that it's like, 8-9 episodes of content to go on that planet with them. So I don't know. Yeah. It'll be interesting.
I mean, I don't think they're going to do a second season of Ahsoka where she's just there because if Skeleton Crew's already there, how much story can you tell with just a handful of people on the planet that's as significant? So I feel like skeleton crew could be that bridge, but I don't want Ahsoka to overpower the show either. So I just don't know. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that, because it just turns into the way
Yeah.
Book of Boba Fett did, where it's Mando season 2.5 for the last 2 episodes.
That's a
And
very, very valid point. Yeah.
because the plot for it seems super cool. I'm not going to make it a skeleton crew episode here, but
Right.
I would not be surprised at all if we just get a 1 or 2, like kind of how Sabine is explaining to Ezra what happened in the galaxy.
Yeah.
Like it's a
Yeah.
30-second conversation. It could be them explaining, we got stranded, whatever, we need to get back. And that's essentially it, maybe with a
Yeah.
little bit of screen time. Wouldn't shock me at all if they did that, but I hope they don't.
Yeah, and it's kind of in a weird place because, like I said, I feel like you can't do a full season of it, so it'd have to be split with something else. But at the same time, I don't think it works going forward to continue to split like Thrawn and Ahsoka, right? Because I talked about it before, but like they've become very different stories at this point, right? They're
They
on
have,
very
yeah.
different paths and trajectories. I don't, and I feel like we saw a little bit of that messing with the flow of stuff as the show went on.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
previously it was just these three groups who were really converging on this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like Thrawn's got to be its own thing at this point, right? Like it's got to be, the focus has to be on that story over there. It doesn't make sense in my mind to be bouncing back and forth between the two. And so I
No.
don't, there's a lot of stuff I'd like to see with them, but that's where I'm curious is how do you balance that between, is it going to be in another show? Are they going to do like some sort of like really short form thing just to kind of fill it in? Like, I don't know, because I don't feel like it's enough for a full season, but I think it's
Yeah.
important enough to not want to just feel like it's meshed in with other stuff going on. So,
Right. I have a
yeah.
major worry that they're going to treat it kind of how Grogu just comes back in one episode of Mando, like, oh, this is how they got back together.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
seems as if the Book of Boba Fett, the only reason that show existed was to get Grogu back to
Yeah.
Mando. When you look at it
Yeah.
from the big picture, if they don't do anything else with it. So given that Dave and John played a big role in that, it's not past the two of them to kind of quickly explain something just to keep the story moving. So I do worry about that. But I also have a wish list in case they do decide to let Ahsoka take the show over too.
I was about to ask you, like, if we do get time with them over there, what is it that you particularly want to see?
Yeah, so if we do get time with Ahsoka and Sabine, there's really maybe 3 things I would like for them to explore. 4 if you don't bundle 2 together. So the first thing, obviously, I want to see them continue Sabine's training. She knows how to use the Force, or she's able to now, for sure. She can pull lightsabers and push humans long distances. So she's good with the Force. I want to see Ahsoka train her a little bit. It doesn't have to be like, it would be a pretty boring show if all it was her training, but some aspect of her making these breakthroughs or something. I would like to see Anakin appear to both of them, not to take over the show, because if Skywalkers show up, they do become a vacuum in Star Wars. So you don't want them to take all of the attention away from Ahsoka, Sabine, or even the skeleton crew kids as well. But you want something out of him to show up, because it was good for Luke when he would see Force Ghost Obi-Wan, and so things like that I think would be cool to see. But just a deeper dive into how she's progressing in the Force. And one method, which is the next thing I would like to see, could be through conflict. So Shin is still there. She is going to be leading that group of raiders, it appears. Like her story just begs to continue to be told.
Yeah.
And if you read the Skeleton Crew little copyright thing that they put out, they come across harm and danger while they're there. So I'm assuming that's Shin and those raiders. So I'm hoping we see Sabine continue her rivalry with Shin. I think that would make a lot of sense, because it just kind of was left off. And I think a great way for her to grow in the Force and as a Jedi would be to face this conflict. So that could provide that. So yeah, I think that would make sense if she's the antagonist of this story, if that's the route they decide to go.
Yeah, and I think I'm excited to see more of her, because now she's kind of unshackled, right? Like
She
Balin
is.
kind of kept her in check. We see a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of that anger and dark side come out, when she's force choking Sabine
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
earlier in the episode, and like it's Balin that checks her, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's not what we're doing. So like
Yeah.
she doesn't have that now. So I'm really interested to see where her character goes, and I hope we do get to see more of her. And I'd love it if she started like her own little, maybe even like dark side of the Force group over there. So I don't know.
Yeah.
To the point about Sabine, you and I talked about this today. Like, I do think she needs something to continue to be a compelling character at this point, right? Because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
what was the tension for her is resolved at this point, right? She can use the Force. She's on good terms with Ahsoka now, and so I don't, like I mentioned to you today, I don't want her to just become like a sidekick, right? And so
Right.
I do think that foil with Shin could help continue to keep her compelling as she trains or whatever it is that they're going to be doing. One of the things I would like to see, which again this might get mixed in other places, but if we're going to see them over there, I'd like to see them really exploring and investigating some of these places on the planet. Like I want to see them like learning about the Mortis connection and all this stuff that we know has got
Mm-hmm.
to come at some point, right?
Yeah, they're not just going
Um,
to do that and leave us there. I don't think.
but again, like we talked about, that all that could come in Skeleton Crew, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
could be where we get a lot of that. So that's one of those things that I might still get, even if it's not Ahsoka and Sabine doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I definitely like to keep following them and see a little bit of what they do. And with Anakin, because you brought up seeing him some, I'd really like a proper confrontation, right? Like World Between Worlds Anakin was very much like teacher Anakin, right? I'm here for a
Yeah.
purpose. I'm going to do it. And then that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd really like to see not necessarily teacher and Padawan interaction, but as friends, like a communication about what
Yeah.
happened with him and how she processed. Like, I feel like that's kind of like a dream situation of mine, is like to hear Anakin explain like his fall.
Yeah.
Don't know that we ever get that, because that, like you said, that's something that's going to suck the attention away from everything else. But
Mm-hmm.
um, knowing he's there, like that's a conversation I'd love to see him actually have with Ahsoka. That might be a
I
bit of a pipe dream, but
No, I agree with that. And I don't think it's crazy to think, because he does, and you mentioned that to me in that episode where when we're trying to figure out what her lesson was, and she brings up what he becomes, and he goes, "Oh, is that what this is all about?" Like that's kind of along
yeah,
the same vein of that. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw that. Maybe not in Skeleton Crew. It's going to be weird if
no,
Luke doesn't ever show up, and if Ahsoka and Luke don't have anything to do with each other. So maybe
yeah,
that could be a spot where him and Leia are also involved with it. I don't know. That would be like major pipe dream. I
yeah.
would like to see that.
Bringing up Luke, like I do feel like that's becoming like all right, like he's got to pop up at some point, right? Like they've built up so
Yeah.
much, and there's so much threat growing. I feel like they can only hold off having him involved somehow for so long. So,
Yeah. I hope they
um,
do it really well and build up the
yeah,
tension on it too,
yeah.
because that's what they've
So,
done so far. I was expecting him to show up in season 1, because I thought it would be odd if he didn't. So if they just
yeah,
keep bringing us along and bringing us along, and eventually he does show up, like it'll blow the roof off.
yeah. I think it'll be cool. I'm glad I'm not the one who has to figure that out, because I'm
Yeah.
sure that is balancing a tightrope, figuring out when to
Oh, for
use,
sure.
such a monumental character to
For
the whole thing.
sure.
So,
So
yeah,
yeah, I'm with you on that. I would love to see that. And then really the last thing I wanted to see. So I want to see Sabine training. I want to see some conflict with Shin and to continue her story. And then the last thing is, I don't think you can just have a story on this planet without answering to some of the Mortis stuff on it. Kind of like what you
yeah,
said. So they're going to have to do something with Balin. Ahsoka has such a big connection to Mortis. I mean, we talk about Anakin having a big connection to Mortis, but Ahsoka died there.
yeah,
I mean, if you want to talk about anybody having a big connection, she died and
yeah.
came back to life on Mortis. So honestly,
It's a pretty big life experience.
yeah, I mean, most people only get to do it once. So so she got to do it and then continue going on. So we know Morai is on Peridia with her. That's
Yeah,
usually a
yeah,
telltale sign that something is going on. I did realize that Morai was in The Mandalorian as well, which just briefly
mm.
in season 2. So I had said in the
I had forgotten
past,
about that.
and really it's outside of that, I feel like Morai has only kind of showed up in terms of these force type situations in these big moments, and I don't necessarily know that what happened in Mando season 2 would qualify as that. But
I'm gonna have to go back and
yeah,
look at
you
that
just
now
see
because
her in the
I'm curious.
woods.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
interesting.
but either way, can outside of that, Morai shows up when there is some big thing going on. You know, she's in the world between worlds, on Mortis, on Peridia, which has the Mortis connection, obviously. So I think Ahsoka has to do some exploring along the lines of that too. But again, this is just a really big story to try to get all of these pieces fit in on. So it concerns me that there's so much out there with seemingly not a lot of time to tell it. Now, Star Wars is excellent at delaying movies. So maybe they bump this New Republic movie back a year or two and we get some additional seasons of this story to really build up to the movie. I would support that wholeheartedly. I would be 40 by the time the movie comes out. But, you know, if we get a lot of stories up until that point and it's good stories, I'd be okay with it. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to explore. And I think if they leave out Mortis for Ahsoka, it would really almost be a crime because that's such a big part of who she is. It's the only reason she's alive. And so she has to do some reconciling, exploring something with that.
Yeah, and I think you risk losing people's engagement too with their story over there with if you just tease this big Mortis thing and then drop it, right? Like if it doesn't come into play, I think that's going to be in the back of everybody's mind. It's like, well, we thought this is where this is going. This is what we really want to know about. Like we want to know about this Mortis connection, what's going on. So I do think they have to do something with it, right?
It's like the elephant in the room at this point.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And depending on what they decide to do with Balin, right? Like, I think there's just a lot that we don't know that they have to figure out and work out that'll really depend on that'll really dictate how much content they're going to be able to put over there, right? Like, if Balin's story is able to continue, whether they recast or whatever they do, then if you dive into that along with Shin, along with Ahsoka and Sabine, and you're willing to dive deep into the Mortis stuff, then I'd say, yeah, like you probably have a pretty solid show right there that could go, 7-8 episodes. But it's just not knowing how much of that stuff they're gonna try to wrap up versus continue to utilize it in the story. So it's hard
that's
to know.
a good point. That's a really good point. Maybe if they do throw all that together, I think so. Skeleton Crew is going to have to be. They get to this galaxy. Spoiler warning if anyone doesn't want this, but it was on the screen at Star Wars Celebration. The pirate guy from Mando season 3 is involved in it. The one that flies off and doesn't go down with the ship. He's apparently like the bad guy in this. So one prevailing theory is he's the one that kind of chases them and they end up in this galaxy running away from that pirate. That's yet to be seen.
Was he the main pirate?
He was not like the Davy Jones pirate, but he was the main one in those ships, the little starfighters.
Oh yeah, okay, yep.
Yeah, so he's in it. That was one heck of a storyline. So he was in it. Mando season 3 was the worst. I'll just go ahead and say
we weren't expecting a Caribbean crossover.
Like the more I think about Mando season 3, it was absolutely sucked. But we'll keep going.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot of something. So either way, they get there. Maybe like they have to have some interactions with him, and then they get over there and they run into Ahsoka at the end, and maybe they get their own season of exploring and being lost, and you get that Goonies, Stranger Things type coming of age story, and then they run into Ahsoka, and maybe that's how Ahsoka season 2 happens, and you can explore Balin, Shin, Mortis, Ahsoka. Like there are more stories to tell, and the focal point becomes all of them getting home from there. Maybe. I don't know, but that seems as if you could combine all those things in a second season of Ahsoka without her being in the galaxy with Thrawn.
Yeah, and you could. I mean, there's always ways to make that flow, even if they're happening at the same time but not coming out at the same time, right? Like,
the
Skeleton Crew meets up with them at the end, and then the show just starts before that and ends at that same point. They could kind of converge there, but like there's just a lot of unknown right now. And a side note, the more we talk about Skeleton Crew, I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to be a really fun show. I think it'll be interesting. I think there'll be some really cool stuff in it, but I think it's going to just be a fun show to watch. So
no, I agree. And the fact that it's tying into this big world that that
Yeah.
Ahsoka has set up. Ahsoka has really set up a big world to explore now. I don't maybe inadvertently,
Yeah.
maybe purposefully. There's a lot of different ways things can go, and so I think that's kind of when we start talking about what is going to happen with Sabine and Ahsoka. That's how we've got on all these different tangents. Is there are so many different ways it can go. Like if you're listening and you're saying, well, we started with Sabine and Ahsoka, but we've talked about Luke, Skeleton Crew, we've talked about
Yeah.
Anakin, Mortis, Shin. That's because it literally could go any of those directions.
Yeah.
And that's a genius way to set up a big cliffhanger, is the fact that
Yeah.
you could decide to tell all these different story points and have years of content if you decided. I would really be okay with any and all of those things, really, except for the first option that I laid out, which is just completely brushing it off altogether and
Yeah.
whisking them back. I'm afraid that could happen, but all the other stuff
Yeah, I
sounds
feel
like
like
a lot
there'd
of
be
fun.
a
Yeah.
lot of missed opportunity in that. So hopefully, hopefully
Yeah.
that's not it. And I think it was like in one of the first episodes we did. It was when we first found out there's this new galaxy, right? Like that
Yeah.
was one of my biggest concerns is we're gonna go here and leave, and then that's it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
just gonna be kind of left there for everyone to wonder about. So I'm really excited that we're potentially continuing to explore it more, and hopefully that it will continue to be, not necessarily at the expense of all the cool stuff we got going on the other side, but just that it's not left untouched. That
Yeah.
seems like they're not going to leave it untouched is exciting. So
I was thinking about that today. I recorded a video just talking about the 3 things that Ahsoka got right, and I'm not sure when it's going to drop. If it'll be this week, next week, whatever. So it may already be out by the time this comes out. Just depends on when I get it edited. But the one thing is setting up this big galaxy and this big story. And I was thinking we weren't necessarily super excited, or at least you weren't, to start with on this new galaxy. And now it's like the coolest thing that they've done is we've got one planet in a different galaxy that is almost like designated for exile now. And I think that's
yeah,
super cool, especially now that they threw Mortis on it too.
no, I
So
agree.
yeah, man, there's so much that they could do. I know we ventured a long way away from Sabine and Ahsoka, but really that's what they could do. All of those things could play into Sabine and Ahsoka. There's so many different ways it could go.
Yeah,
Did you have any other
yeah.
wish
No, I
list
mean
items?
just to your point. I mean it's easy to get distracted and go off on other courses just because all these things were kind of elements of the show, right? Like they were all
Mm-hmm.
kind of weaved in a really good way throughout most of the show. Some of it was a little rushed towards the end, but
Yeah.
for the most part, these are all elements that are just coming off of this season of show, and so
Yeah.
it's how much they packed into it and did a pretty good job of. But yeah, I mean, it leaves a lot of direction of just different things that they could choose to dive into, and I'm hoping that none of them do get just like the short, we need to wrap this up so we can focus on other things
Yeah.
type treatment, right?
Yeah.
Like I hope they all do get enough time for some interesting things to be told.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one thing I'll throw out, this is, I might take this one to the bank, is Sabine's hair will change. I know it's
Ah,
controversial, but if you look
yeah,
at Anakin,
that's
Anakin's hair changes every episode. Obi-Wan's changes every episode.
yeah.
Luke's changes every episode. I mean, seems
Yeah,
as if they could change your hair. I don't know.
yeah, I think that's a fairly safe bet. I think I would be on your side with that one.
I wonder with
So,
how time flows over there if her hair will grow at a faster rate, depending on.
yeah, it will be interesting if and when we pick up with them, how much of a lapse of time there will be.
Yeah,
If
they
it's
need
going
to
to be
really
right
answer
after,
that question,
and
because
so
they didn't really. It almost seems as if time changed the same way in both galaxies based on when Sabine and Ahsoka show up and find Ezra. They don't really try to explain that, so maybe that's something they will touch on.
yeah, I don't know how long it takes to travel back and forth between two different galaxies, right? Like
Oh wow,
obviously it's not going to make for interesting television just to sit inside a ship for a
yeah.
week traveling through hyperspace. So
Yeah, it'll be
um,
interesting to see.
yeah,
One thing we talked about, are you content with that discussion on Sabine and Ahsoka?
yeah, like you said, we kind of went all over the place, but those are all the things that I would love to see expanded upon. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of potential left on
The
the table that
positive
hopefully they
thing,
follow up with.
yeah. I was going to say the positive thing is there's like one thing we wouldn't really want to see, and then there's like
Yeah,
24 things that we would like to see. So if you're just playing the odds are we see more of the cool stuff than we see the boring. Hopefully the odds are in our favor. But going forward, this is going to be, we say, our last discussion on Ahsoka for a period of time. We were discussing what we would like to do on the podcast going forward. And really, there's a lot in Star Wars that you could talk about going forward. But we thought doing a chronological breakdown of the Star Wars story would be pretty fun, just going through the movies. So the next 9 weeks, maybe 10 if we decide to throw in Rogue One, I think we're going to just do the Skywalker saga. So episodes 1 through episode 9, we're going to talk about the narrative. I suppose we can always add in critiques and things that we did like as well.
Yeah.
But really just try to break down this Star Wars story and weave it from start to finish. And I think that will be a easy thing to do for some episodes. And I think it will be a difficult thing to try to weave for other episodes, namely episodes 8 and 9. But I do think it's something
you got plenty to say about episodes 8 and 9.
Well, I do, but I don't. This isn't going to be like a hate fest.
No,
I
know.
I want it to be like, okay, this is one continuous story. So can we spin it that way?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is going to be sticking in one movie, right? Like it's so hard for me to talk about one movie without venturing out to things in other movies. Part of that's just my brain, but everything's
that's a good point.
All of it's so connected so well. It makes it difficult just to stick within the context of a single film.
That is a good point.
It'll be a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. So let's throw this out there. Let's say we cannot reference the future movies or other movies until we have passed it. So episode 1, we can only talk episode 1. And then episode 2, we can reference back as if it's the first time we've ever seen any of it.
Man.
We're going to get to Empire Strikes Back, and I'm going to go, can you believe Darth Vader is Luke's father?
What?
Did not believe that. No, I guess technically we would have known it by that point because we would have seen it in 3. So
we will pretend we don't know what's happening in further movies.
No, this is going to be fun. We'll try it, but obviously if there's important things we can we can weave it in. So yeah, that's where we're going. So next week we're going to talk the Phantom Menace. And then each following week, we're just going to build upon that with the next Star Wars movie. And then by Christmas, you'll get to hear a review of the saga by 2 guys who just like to talk Star Wars. So you're welcome, world. All 30, 70 y'all that listen to this.
Yeah. Don't expect any really high level conversation here.
Yeah.
We'll keep it as eloquent as we can. We're pretty simple guys, though. So
just a couple of simple people trying to make their way in this galaxy. So thank you so much for joining us. If you've made it this far, we really do appreciate that you hop in on our conversation. It's a lot of fun. We really enjoy it. This is a hobby for us, not like a job or anything. So it blows my mind that anyone decides to watch this outside of maybe our wives, and that I'm surprised they watch it too. So again, thanks so much for watching this. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe. It will really help grow this channel, and it will help us be able to do more Star Wars content as we move forward. So again, thanks for joining us. See you next Friday with the Phantom Menace. And as always, may the Force be with you.